Hi, I'm Brandon Clifford. I'm an artist and an architect. I teach at MIT and I run a research lab called Matter Design. I was in the first grade when the Berlin Wall fell, so I don't have a particular memory of it myself. But I know it affected my dad considerably because he served in the army as a helicopter pilot in Germany, and he spoke about that moment for years to come. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an artist and an architect. So on the surface, that kind of came true. But I never would have imagined that I would be a scholar and a professor. This avenue of research has really opened up some potentials, and I found a contribution in this pursuit. But I think it also highlights that our education system doesn't exactly identify through its standards, test for creativity or alternative ways of thinking. So I'm really quite fortunate that I've been able to find this avenue through higher education. So many of the pressing issues we face today have already been solved in the past. It's just that our contemporary minds are full of blind spots to these solutions. So what I do is I mine knowledge from the past that holds resonance with topics of today, and I insert that knowledge into our blind spots so that we can break through the default solutions that we've been approaching these problems with. Now, I wouldn't argue that any of our research findings are new because they're rediscoveries of developments from the past. But for instance, while there are archaeologists and historians that research rigorously similar precedents, I'm not interested in proving any truths about the past. I'm only interested in leveraging the potentials of that knowledge to transform our future. I'll give you an example of that. These are the moai of Rapa Nui. And this is an image of the moai in the quarry. And this is an image of the moai at their final destination. These moai represent a common set of challenges that all megalithic civilizations faced. Namely, how were these massive stones moved and how were they placed? So for the past few years, I've been giving myself the challenge of putting on public performances of the ancient but pretty straightforward task of just figuring out how to get big objects to move and stand up. Like this 16-foot tall statue designed to walk across land and stand under the limited strength of a handful of graduate students. Or this floating stone that swims horizontally under bridges and drinks river water to stand upright. Or this 4,000-pound behemoth designed to spring itself to life to dance on stage. In testing this problem over and over, we started to think about the perception of life in these objects, but also about how humans engage with these inanimate beings. Now, at this point, you're probably asking yourself what any of this has to do with architecture. And for that, let's just return to Easter Island for a moment. When the Dutch explorers first encountered the island, they asked the people of Rapa Nui how their ancestors could have possibly moved those massive statues. And the Rapa Nui told them, "Our ancestors didn't move those stones. The stones walked themselves." Now, for centuries this was dismissed, but it turns out the Rapa Nui were telling the truth. The statues, known as moai, were transported standing, pivoting from side to side. As spectacular as the moai are for visitors today, you have to imagine being there then, with colossal moai marching around the island. Because the real memorial was not the objects themselves, but the cultural ritual of bringing a stone to life. And as an architect, I've been chasing that dream because so much of our profession is dedicated to building the finite conclusion of a building without thinking about how the materials are sourced, how they're transported, how they're assembled, or what the afterlife of that building looks like. If we can start to think about architecture as a performance, we can interrupt this cycle that we have with an addiction to new materials. So as a continuation of that thought, we've been asking about how we can embed the behavior of assembly into the objects themselves. If a brick is designed for one hand to pick up and place all day long, and a CMU is designed for two hands to pick and place, anything over that should be lifted and handled by fossil fuel burning heavy lifting equipment. But if we can learn something from the ancients about how to embed intelligence of transportation and assembly into the objects themselves, we can start to build a smarter way of constructing our future. This research initiative has challenged us to think about architecture beyond the result and to encompass the entire lifespan, from conception through transportation, assembly, as well as the afterlife. And we did this through a series of very dumb exercises that interrogate ritual, experience, theatricality, and play. By embracing the myth that stones are alive, we were able to reimagine construction, not as a site for labor, but as a site for wonder and whimsy. Now, we ask ourselves this question regularly about how our research can contribute to society at large. And we do that through a variety of ways of translating our basic research into social impact initiatives. Some of those, for example, could be the cyclopean cannibalism research that looks at how we can digest our building industry's waste to construct new architectures. So we've been looking at different methods of cyclopean cannibalism and repositioning the algorithms that these civilizations used to reconstruct their apparently cryptic walls as a way for the building industry to automate this process through digital scanning and robotic carving. You can also see this in a project we're calling a Kia Key, which is a community center at the US-Mexico border. A Kia Key is an attempt to think about how we can build outdoor community centers that gather people together for a variety of programs, whether that be gathering thousands of people for a music venue or just a select number of people for breaking bread over a dinner table. A Kia Key reconfigures to allow for as many different programming possibilities to offer something to this community. Or for example, how can these ways of thinking contribute to new ideas about play and education? The Grayson School reached out to us asking if we could reconsider a model of play for adolescent students. And by designing this play lab to address the underrepresented category of adolescent play, we had to overcome the association that term play has with early childhood, one dedicated to physical activities such as swings, slides, and monkey bars. But adolescents deploy their imagination differently, through intellectual challenges, rigorous experiments, and world building. This served as an incredibly rewarding design challenge for us to craft an infrastructure for young adults to play. So there are a number of alignments here that are cryptically embedded with calculations to celestial bodies. And over the course of their education, the students will be discovering the meaning behind these design decisions. In our work, so many questions remain unanswered. The thing that keeps me up at night is thinking about what things do we not know about? What could we be discovering? But more importantly, what kind of avenues we could be using to explore this. So for me in particular, one of the areas that I've been trying to exercise is performance, thinking about time-based media and its relationship to architecture. And that's an area that I'd like to exercise more.